Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalie and this is Family Makes Sense. Hey guys, so today I'm bringing you 15 questions to ask before renting an apartment. Are you ready to move out of your parents' house or the college dorm? Chances are you're probably going to be moving into an apartment or a house. Here are questions to ask before renting an apartment or a house for the first or even the fifth time. But first, make sure that you are ready. Check out my post on things to do before living on your own. And once you're done with that, move on to how to rent your first apartment. Once you've done those things, you are ready to start touring apartments. If this is your first time renting an apartment, here is a quick summary of the things that you should do. Number one is know your budget. Your rent should not be more than 25 to 30% of your income. Number two, know your preferences. Do you need to have it close to work? Do you want a dishwasher? Do you not want a fourth floor walk-up? Once you've found some apartments that fit your preference, then it's time to call the landlord and set up a showing. Now, most landlords need to give about a 12 to 24 hour notice to the current tenant, so you can probably expect to get a tour within 1 to 2 days of making the phone call. But if the apartment is vacant, you might just be able to get in that day. Due to the small nature of an apartment, it will probably take a max of 30 minutes to view each place, so just keep that in mind if you're scheduling multiple apartment viewings in one day. But that's also why it's important to have a list prepared of questions so you can just fire them off. Head over to my Etsy shop to get this checklist that you can bring with you on all of your apartment tours. So without further ado, here are 15 questions to ask before renting an apartment or a house. Number one, how much do utilities cost? One of the first questions you should ask before renting is about the cost of utilities. Utilities are very important to factor into the cost of your rent because just like your rent, you have to pay these every single month. Some landlords do include heat or water with your rent. It's not free, it's already just built into the price of your rent. If you find a nice place to rent for about $800 a month and then the utilities are around $200 to $300 a month, it may be worth it to look for a little bit more expensive place that has cheaper utilities. Generally, the bigger and older the dwelling, the more your utilities are going to cost. If you live up north like we do and you find that your utility bills in the winter skyrocket, head on over to my video about 18 ways that you can save on your heating bill. These are all very apartment friendly too. Also, I have 2 more posts for you to go and look at if you're looking to save on utilities. Number 1 is how to stay cool without air conditioning, and number 2 is how to save money on your water usage. Those will be linked down below. All right, moving on to the next question. Is budget billing available? Utilities are a regular expense, but the amount that you pay varies from month to month. For example, your heating bill is going to be less in the fall and the spring, and then it's probably going to go up in the winter. So how do you budget for this? Enter budget billing. This is where you pay the same amount every single month instead of having really high bills in the winter and then really low bills in the fall and spring. Though, I don't know of anyone who would complain about having too low of bills. If you ask your potential landlord about this, they may say that's a question for the energy company. The energy company averages out your usage over the entire year and then you pay that per month. They reevaluate your usage every 6 months and then adjust your bill accordingly. You never pay more or less than what you actually use. If you decide that you don't want to do budget billing anymore and there is a balance due at the end, then you have to pay that in full. Predictable bills make budgeting a lot easier. The next question is, what are the lease terms? Are you signing a 9-month lease, a 12-month lease? Most leases are for 1 year, but if the landlord is desperate or you might live in a college town, the landlord might be willing to work with you on the length of the lease. If you're going to school for 9 months and then you're back home for 3 months, it might be beneficial to ask the landlord if they even offer a 9-month lease. Another great question to ask about the lease terms is what is and isn't allowed in the apartment. The lease terms do not change once you sign for good or bad. The good means that the rent won't go up unexpectedly during your lease term. The bad is that if there's something that you don't like and you've already signed the lease, you're kind of out of luck. So make sure that you read the lease thoroughly. Some landlords have some quirky rules in their lease that they may not bring up, so just make sure that you read it. For instance, we lived in a place and the lease said that you cannot hang your clothes out to dry outside. You weren't allowed to do any car repairs on the premises, and you had to have white backed curtains. We weren't aware of all of these because we didn't read the lease as thoroughly as we should have, but we had to comply because we signed the lease. The next question to ask is there a guest policy? Most leases allow only those that are on the lease to stay in the apartment. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't have a friend spend the night here and there, but it does mean that if you're having someone spend the night for an extended period of time, usually 2 weeks or longer, then some landlords consider them living there. They'd either need to be on the lease, or at least you should let management know that you have someone staying with you. If you are planning on getting a roommate, make sure that they are on the lease and that they sign it. Don't get a roommate that your landlord doesn't know about and cross your fingers and hope that they're gonna pay the rent. They may not. Ideally, everybody above the age of 18 should sign the lease. That means that if they do something that's in violation of the lease, then they are responsible, not you. Another question to ask is there a pet policy? If you have a furry friend, ask the landlord if they allow pets. Some may for an additional security deposit and sometimes a monthly fee as well. Next question is, how much is due when the lease is signed? Some apartments may require an application fee. We've personally paid anywhere from $100 to $500. Yes, $500 for an application fee. The nice thing is that this is usually applied to your first month's rent, or it could be forfeited if you decide to give up the apartment. That's why it's important to only submit applications and fees that you are sure of. But if the application fee is $10 or $20, then it may not be as big of a loss as, let's say, $500. Along with the application fee, when you sign the lease, you will need to provide a security deposit. Some landlords want just the first month's rent, or some even want 2 or 3. This is all added on top of the first month of the rent that you pay. The security deposit does not count as rent, and it will be returned to you if you leave the apartment in good working order. This is basically insurance for the landlord in case something happens in the apartment or they need to repaint or something. They will take it out of your security deposit. Another great question to ask before renting an apartment is, how does the rent get paid? More places are becoming electronically hip, but there are some places that still require the good old-fashioned check in an envelope. In all of the places that we've lived, we've had to fill out a check and put it in the mail, all with the exception of one. But what if you don't have checks? I mean, you can do virtually anything online these days, so more and more people just don't carry checks around. Not to mention, they aren't exactly a great way to pass money back and forth. I mean, there's a ton of personal information on them. There's your first and last name, your address, sometimes your phone number, your account number, and your routing number. So basically everything somebody needs to take your money. A more secure alternative is money orders through the post office or your bank. At the post office, you can turn cash into a check. If the rent is $1,000, you pay the post office $1,000 plus a small fee, and then they'll issue you a check that you can then give to your landlord. But this isn't also a super secure way either, because if you lose it, then you're out of luck, because it's basically the same as cash. There are also some scam money order services going around, so check with your landlord to see if this is even a form that they will accept. Alternatively, you can also go to your bank and ask for them to issue a check on your behalf. On to the next question. Is renter's insurance required? Renter's insurance may be required in the lease. Even if it isn't, it's still a good idea to get it. You may even be able to bundle it with your car insurance, and you can generally find something for around $15 a month, but that is completely dependent on where you live. It covers you in case your stuff gets stolen, or if your place becomes uninhabitable due to a fire or a leak or something like that. Shop around online and check out different policies for their coverage details. Next question, how often and by how much does the rent go up? Generally, rent goes up every year, but this is also dependent on your location. I found a study that shows that the average increase in my state is about 1% per year. But in our own personal experience, we've seen rent increase 4% a year. If you rent for $1,000 and it goes up about 1% a year, you can pretty much expect it to go up $10 a month for the entire year. At one apartment we lived in, they increased the rent every time we signed a new lease. We moved in the winter, and if we signed a year lease, that would put us moving out in the winter. Well, there was a clause in the lease term that said we couldn't move out in the winter. More on that later. So instead we signed a 6-month lease. Once 6 months was up, our rent went up. At the end of 6 months, we signed a year lease. Once that year lease was up, our rent went up again. So in the year and a half that we lived there, our rent went up by $60 a month. Before renting, ask about any potential rental increases just to avoid any bad surprises. Next question, is off-street parking available? If you have a car, you may want to ask a question about parking or look for a place that has off-street parking available. In bigger cities, off-street parking is less common just because there's a lot more people and a lot less space. At one of the places that we lived in, off-street parking was included in the rent if we wanted to park outside. If we wanted to park in the underground garage, that was an extra $45 a month. If the apartment complex doesn't offer parking, they may know where you can find some. Alternatively, you can also contact the city and see if there's any public parking lots, but you may need to purchase a permit. The next question is how much notice needs to be given when moving out? Some places require a 60-day written notice to be given, even if your lease is going to be up and you've already verbally told them that you're leaving. Just always put it in writing just to be on the safe side. Next question is there a time when moving out is not permitted? This may seem like a silly question to ask, but there are some places that have a no move out in winter clause. This means that you can't move out from November to February. Well, you can, but you're still on the hook for lease payments even if your lease is up. How can they do this? I do not know, but if it's in the lease and you sign it, you gotta comply. We have run into this multiple times. At one place, our lease was up in December, but we were still responsible for the rent until February. Luckily, they found somebody to come in and fill it for those last 2 months, so we didn't have to pay. All right, moving on to the next question. Is painting or using nails permitted? When moving into a space, the first thing you want to do is make it your own. Hanging things on the walls goes a long way towards making your space feel like home. But some apartments may not let you hang things on walls, paint, or burn candles. In my experience, when we've asked if we could use nails, they said it's okay as long as we spackle before we leave. I even know of some people who paint their apartments but then paint it back to the original color when they leave. In one of the places we lived in, we've painted and it made the space look better and the landlord was okay with it, so we didn't have to paint it back when we left. Most times, landlords are okay with what you do as long as you return the apartment in original or better shape. Some may even chip in for supplies, so make sure that you ask. Another question to ask is, are there any updates planned to the complex? This is a good way of getting an idea of any upcoming construction. Construction means noise, dust, limited parking, and more. It may even mean that you have to vacate your apartment for some time. And here's the kicker, it could also mean an increase in rent prices. If they update the place, even if it's just fixing the water heater or replacing the dishwasher, guess who's gonna pay for those updates? You, in the form of increased rent when the lease is up. All right, the last and final question is, how are emergency repairs handled? What happens when the water heater goes out unexpectedly or the toilet starts overflowing? Speaking from personal experience, these things rarely happen between normal business hours. So is there a number for after-hour repairs that you can call? How soon can you expect somebody to come and fix it? When you've settled on a place and you're getting ready to sign a lease, you can ask for more definition of the gray areas of maintenance. Things like, who is responsible for changing the light bulb or the toilet seat? What happens if the drains get clogged? Those are things that you want to know so you can be prepared if you are the one that needs to fix those things. And there you have it. There are 15 questions to ask before renting an apartment or a house. Don't forget to stop by my Etsy shop and grab your checklist. You can print this out as many times as you need to and bring it with you on all of your apartment tours. I've listed out all of the questions and then I have a space for notes as well. Once you find a landlord and an apartment that satisfies all of your questions, go ahead and submit your application. There may be a fee to pay, but the turnaround is usually pretty quick and they'll generally let you know within the week whether you got the apartment or not. And if you do get it, you are one step closer to independence. Share this with a friend who is also looking for an apartment, and who knows, they could end up being your potential roommate. Also, are you moving into an apartment with kids? Well, we've been there and done that. Check out my other YouTube videos to see how we navigate apartment life with a toddler. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe and turn on your notification bell. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.